So in this video, you'll learn how to draw like a pro. Most of the drawing styles can be categorized into two types: line art and lineless art. I mean, there's stuff like pseudo line art and shit, but for now, let's just focus on these two. Line art is usually great for drawing anime and cartoon, and realism is usually good in lineless art. So let's start with materials and mediums. You can literally use whatever you want. I used to draw with my fingers on my phone before I got my drawing tablet. My friend still draws with his mouse and he's amazing. So like, it literally doesn't matter what tool you use to draw, just experiment and see what works for you. Okay, so first tip is, instead of drawing a bold stroke, use several less confident light strokes and then cleaning them up later. It will look much better and proportions will improve too. Same goes for the lineless art. Instead of blocking colors or highlights or shadow where it needs to be, just make a mess and render it later layer by layer, which leaves us on to our next point, which is working in layers for like I said, just first draw a rough sketch, then clean the sketch, then ink it or whatever you find fancy, then color it if you are planning to. But layering in digital is even more easier. You just click a button and you get a new layer. For lineless art, just drop some color, or if you're working on grayscale, just drop some shades of gray and then layer by layer keep working on it and make sure proportions are good and keep polishing it, and add main highlights and shadows at the last, like cherry on top of a cake. Tip number 3 is proportions. You would need to get your proportions right. Just look up for anatomy videos on YouTube. For anime, I recommend Mark Riley and My Mangaka Life. For realism, I recommend looking for Lumi's method. Just keep practicing proportions, because you can never practice proportions enough and there is always something to improve on. Fourth tip is to look up reference of whatever you're trying. Toes, Google toes. Hands, Google hands. Anime, look up anime. Literally just Google every single thing you draw, because it will help you with the details and proportions and color and anatomy and everything. And there will usually be images in a lot of different perspectives. So make sure you look at the anatomy and structure and volume of the object and not get confused by the silhouette and perspective, which leads us to the next point. Don't think about your drawing in silhouettes or highlights and shadows. Instead think what is the volume and structure of object and how light will bounce from it, and then decide where the highlights and shadows will go. Tip number 6 is have a well-defined light source. Why you need it is self-explanatory. Tip number 7 is, instead of drawing on white paper, draw on a yellow paper or gray paper. Why is this useful? Is because you won't have to worry about negative space and you can add highlights easily on a darker background using a white pencil or something, and colors will appear much more vivid and saturated due to contrast of the darker background. Tip number 9 is to practice perspective. Just like anatomy, perspective is very important. It will make your poses look a lot more dynamic and background nicer. Tip number 9 is add hue shifts, ambient lighting, reflections and light rays in your scenes. These things are vast advanced topic and suggest looking them up yourself, but they do make your drawing quite nice. And tip number 10 is just to have fun. After all, art is just about having fun. Remember, no artist is perfect and everyone is experimenting and learning just like you.